As beautiful as this community is, that there are believers in Jesus Christ all over the world breaking bread together, remembering that we are brothers and sisters in Christ. And as a beautiful example of that, you see the houses here in front of the communion table, and these were made by our children during Sunday school a few weeks ago, and they remind us of just the community that we are.
Abide in me, as I abide in you. Abide in me, as I abide in
One of the things that most people love and admire about Jesus' teaching is the way that he tells parables. A story that is not real, but it has a deep truth. And so stories like the Good Samaritan, the lost coin, the prodigal son, such beautiful parables. A story that is not real, but a story that tells or teaches a powerful truth. So I invite you to stand if you're comfortable in doing so. We're going to read from an Old Testament passage, Job, and then we'll read from a New Testament passage from the Hebrews. And I'll be reading from the Common English Bible. A man in the land of Uz was named Job. That man was honest, a person of absolute integrity. He feared God and avoided evil. One day, the divine being came to present themselves before the Lord. The adversary also came along them to present himself before the Lord. The Lord said to the adversary, "Where have you come from?" The adversary answered the Lord, "From wandering throughout the earth." The Lord said to the adversary, "Have you thought about my servant Job? For there is no one like him on earth, a man who is honest, who is of absolute integrity, who reveres God and avoids evil. He still holds on to his integrity, even though you incited me to ruin him for no reason." And in chapter 1, it lists all the things that Job has lost: family, livestock, his business. The only persons remaining in his life are his wife and a few friends. Verse 4, the adversary responded to the Lord, "Skin for skin. People will give up everything they have in exchange for their lives. But stretch out your hand and strike his bones and flesh. Then he will definitely curse to your face." The Lord answered the adversary, "There he is within your power. Only preserve his life." Verse 7, the adversary departed from the Lord's presence and struck Job with severe sores from the sole of his feet to the top of his head. Job took a piece of broken pottery to scratch himself and sat down on a mound of ashes. Job's wife said to him, "Are you still clinging to your integrity? Curse God and die." Job said to her, "You're talking like a foolish person. Will we receive good from God, but not also receive the bad?" In all of this, Job did not sin with his lips. And now, from the book of Hebrews, chapter 1. In the past, God spoke through the prophets to our ancestors in many times and many ways. In these final days, though, he spoke to us through a Son. God made his Son the heir of everything and created the world through him. The Son is the light of God's glory and the imprint of God's being. He maintains everything with his powerful message. After he carried out the cleansing of people from their sins, he sat down at the right side of the highest majesty. And the Son became so much greater than the other messengers, such as angels, that he received a more important title than theirs. God didn't put the world that is coming, the world we're talking about, under the angels' control. Instead, someone declared somewhere, "What is humanity that you think about them? Or what are the human beings that you care about them? For a while you made them lower than the angels. You crowned the human beings with glory and honor. You put everything under their control." When God puts everything under their control, God doesn't leave anything out of control. But right now, we don't see everything under their control yet. However, we do see the one who was made lower in order than the angels for a little while. It's Jesus. He's the one who is now crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of his death. He suffered death so that he could taste death for everyone through God's grace. It was appropriate for God, for whom and through whom everything exists, to use experience of suffering to make perfect, to make complete the pioneer of salvation. This salvation belongs to many sons and daughters whom he's leading to glory. This is because the one who makes people holy and the people who are being made holy all come from one source. That is why Jesus isn't ashamed to call them brothers and sisters when he says, "I will publicly announce your name to my brothers and sisters. I will praise you in the middle of the assembly." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. That's a lot of words. Job is a powerful story because we see a shift in what we had been taught about God. And this letter to the Hebrews is believed not to be a letter at all, but to be a sermon that a preacher wrote to preach to a congregation. So we're going to look at Job separately, and then we'll look at this part of a sermon to the Hebrews, and hopefully God will reveal to each of us a commonality that will speak to us individually and collectively in our faith journeys. So until the story of Job, it was believed that if you did good, God was pleased with you. If you did bad, then bad things would happen to you because God was upset with you. The story of Job teaches us a lesson that even today, those of us who proclaim the love, mercy, and grace of Jesus Christ, it's a lesson that most of us need to be reminded of on a daily basis. The truth is that life can be hard. Life can be difficult. And things happen simply because life can be difficult. Or as one book reminds us, sometimes bad things happen to good people. And so this challenging story of Job, this man who has done nothing wrong, it teaches us that Job really isn't as patient as we might think, yet God is always with him. And Job is a man who's done nothing wrong, yet bad things have happened in his life. You see, many Old Testament scholars believe that Job is a parable, a story that is not real, but teaches a deep truth about life and about God. And as we'll discuss in more detail next week, Job speaks out. But the voice I'd like for us to focus on this morning is the voice of Job's wife. And she is under critical and harsh judgment for her comment. Are you still persisting to live with integrity? Curse God and die, she says. But I invite us to pause there for a moment and look deep into all that is happening in Job's life. All that Job has lost, family, livestock, his business. She's lost all of this as well. And sometimes we might forget that. And now she sees her husband in excruciating pain. And it's though she more than anyone knows that Job is a righteous man. Job has done nothing to deserve what is happening to him. He is not to blame. And none of this makes sense. And through it all, you remain faithful. And I think if we're willing to admit it, maybe we have those moments in our lives where we are like Job's wife. We just want to throw in the towel and be done with it. Go back to bed, pull the covers over our head, and just hope things get better. Surely there must be someone to blame. And if we can't find anyone to blame, then we will find a way to blame ourselves. It can be as simple as my team lost the game because I forgot to wear my lucky socks. Someone has to be at blame, right? Or I remember back when Hurricane Katrina hit, there were so many standing and saying that it was God's judgment that Katrina came because of all the evil in New Orleans. And I remember one preacher, his rebuttal was, well, then God has a really bad aim because the French Quarter's fine. But when we're hit with devastation and hardship and we don't have answers, we will look for those in whatever way possible, even if it means finding someone to blame. But yet, if we can move past that and look for the deeper meaning, some of the most beautiful and heartfelt moments I have ever experienced have been when people surrounded me during those difficult, horrible situations. When humanity just seems to be kinder than ever before. When there's generosity. And in the midst of tragedy, dividing lines seem to be erased. Laughter is like a newly discovered treasure. And we remember when we think we are alone and no one cares, we remember that we are not alone. The smile of a stranger, the kindness of a neighbor, all of that means so much more because in the midst of our tragedy and our devastation and our uncertainty, we were able to see the gifts that are truly ours, even in the midst of heartache. We hear those voices that speak out in love and kindness. And so this story of Job, no matter how you see Job, it is a beautiful, beautiful reminder that even in the midst of things in life that don't make sense, that God is not against us, that God is with us, walking through those valleys, walking through those devastating times. Now, this sermon to the Hebrews, it comes years after Jesus has been crucified, buried, and resurrected. And so the preacher to the Hebrews, he's addressing a real and urgent problem. The congregation is exhausted. They're just worn out. And there doesn't seem to be this hope that they keep thinking is theirs. They're tired. They're tired of serving the world. They're tired of worship. They're tired of being peculiar. They're tired of being whispered about in society. They're tired of the spiritual struggles they're going through. They're tired of trying to keep their prayer life going. They are exhausted. And in chapter 12, we read that their hands droop and their knees are weak. In chapter 10, we realize that attendance is down, and that's discouraging, and they're losing confidence. And so this preacher writes this sermon. Professor Tom Long points out that what is most striking about the Hebrews is that the preacher does not appeal to improve group dynamics, doesn't offer conflict management techniques, doesn't reorganize the mission structures, doesn't add a snappy worship service, but rather the preacher preaches about the nature and meaning of Jesus Christ. The nature and meaning of Jesus Christ. Lo, I am with you always, even unto the ends of the world. Because we need to be reminded that this Jesus knows all about our Job moments. This Jesus understands our weariness. And this Jesus understands our doubts. This Jesus understands those times that we want to give up on humanity, that we want to give up on ourselves, even those moments when we want to give up on God. Jesus died in the midst of those moments to prove his love for us. God resurrected Jesus in the midst of the darkest grief and uncertainty and fear his people had ever known, so that we might know that there is a love stronger than our situation, that there is a grace more powerful than the devastating things we're facing, and that there is forgiveness and mercy deeper and stronger than our exhaustion. So maybe it's God's love that we need to hear speaking out this morning. And how does God's love speak out? through the kindness of a stranger, through the helping hands of a friend, through a church family who will not give up on you, to a community that vows to pray for you by name, God's love speaks out.